We're here with
Edward
and Don Cameron. Mm-hmm. And I just real quick, we wanted to interview Don hear about his life and then talk a little about his book. At the very end, his book is Full Gospel Assembly of Washington, D.C. Just want to share quickly about Don. You can call him Don. I call him Don, but I'm sure people call you Professor, Cameron? Or Professor Don?
Chaplain Don.
Chaplain. They call you Chaplain
Professor.
Don? Professor and Doctor?
Don.
You get Doctor?
And my nickname in high school, should I tell you that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I played football, and it just made me mad. Yeah. And sometimes I'd attack people that would use that name. But now I'm not too upset with it.
What?
They'd say, Gork!
Gork.
Come here, Gork!
What is that from? Is that a movie?
Well, I don't know, but the picture in my mind is that you have this tall, skinny, Langley monster. Okay. And so that was my name in high school, Gork.
So let me backtrack just real quick to set up our relationship. I think you came to CC 2014 or 15?
2014.
2014. And you were involved in ministry, but you were never directly involved at our church. You're more of a lay leader. And I think over those years, you've tried to be very careful about balancing your profession and also being an attendee of CCC. Am I correct? Trying to walk that?
No, for about 2 years, I was interim pastor in an English congregation.
Oh, God.
You remember that?
Is this after Richard?
This is after Richard.
Apologize. But what I'm saying is I think you've been really good at being a good team player and not try to exert your credentials.
No, because, it's important to be an asset to a community.
Yes.
And that's what I wanted to do.
And so with that being said, I think you've done a good job. At least for me, I'm sure it can be controversial, but at least I think you try to support people in the church by encouraging them, whether they like it or not, but you try. And I think you've tried to do that with me. And so I appreciate that. And I think you try to share your ideas because you have a lot of experience. And so relating to the present, you've encouraged me to go to, oh my God, what's the name of the Bible college? What is it called again? I said, oh no, you know why? Because I don't actually go there. It's online. So thank you, Don, for encouraging me to go to Ascent to continue my Bible education, which you are a big proponent of, which you also teach at. So Don has been a great asset to me. And I hope that I'm not the only one, Don. So I think that's a good intro. With that being said, we're going to talk a little about your life, and then we'll end with the book, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah. So,
but I just want to say,
go ahead.
Edward and Garrett, thank you for coming to my home. And just to set the stage, we're drinking some tea, and we have some Panera bread pastries. And I've already eaten more than anybody of the pastries.
Don's a big guy.
I'll help out.
Here you go.
Just want to let you know, Don, this is better than any online lecture, meeting with people. Just to let you know that. I think meeting people is the best.
It's a joy to talk.
It's my Zoom meeting.
And that's why I enjoy interviewing people, not just because it makes you feel, highlights other people. I think that's real good for me to learn from other people. I think you agree with that.
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
All right. You grew up in, is it California or Missouri?
I am a Californian.
Okay.
Most of my time was in California, although...
What year was this? Were you born?
I was born not in California.
Yeah.
I was born in East St. Louis.
That's Missouri. So I was good.
That's Illinois. Across the river.
It's next door. Next door.
He's been there.
You were near... I can't remember. You asked me if I've been to Springfield, Missouri.
Springfield, Missouri is where I went to seminary.
Okay.
And also did graduate school at Missouri State University.
That's right. Missouri. And it says that at the back of your biography.
It does. Yeah.
I know. I read it.
Yeah. Missouri was pretty cool. It's the show me state.
Let me see. I forgot. What does it say?
You have the gun?
Yeah. And William and Mary. What did you study there?
I studied American Studies at William and Mary.
And your PhD was from Regent
University.
Is there one in Vancouver?
That's Regent College in Vancouver.
So that's not connected.
They're not connected. They're both evangelical schools.
Okay. Regent, just kind of going all the place. That guy, is that J.I. Packer, is that where he's from?
So J.I. Packer was from Regent College in Vancouver.
That's what I thought. Okay.
And one of your pastors, Pastor Sam, is a graduate. And so is Estella, who is now
she's a chaplain.
Former chaplain.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
She was an active duty chaplain, and she followed her attorney husband,
Mike,
to Washington, D.C., and they are a part of our church.
Yes. I didn't know this. I just knew she told me she was a teacher. She never told me she was a chaplain. Roy said she's a chaplain. I said she's a teacher. And the answer is she's both. But I didn't really know that before.
They are great people.
Yes. Mike used to be a bodybuilder. Did you know that?
It looks like he was a bodybuilder, but he didn't go too far.
Well, he looks like he was. That's keyword. Yeah, he's not in shape anymore, but that's okay. We talked about that. So you grew up in California. Go ahead. Tell me like a little about your childhood.
Well, basically my father.
Oh yeah, you got an interesting story.
Was a Marine in World War II. And, one of the places that he went was an island for 1 year called Palmyra, which was a small, desolate place. And then he went into combat in the Marianas campaigns. But I always, over the years, I've come to conclude that his service in the Marine Corps really impacted him, just emotionally.
I don't know how I couldn't.
Yeah, it did. Now he came back and he went to college, and he became a physical education teacher.
What? That's me. Real quick, this is before he had you, correct?
Before he had me. And then eventually,
not that old. What grades physical?
Oh, just actually in military. So right after that, he went into ROTC. He finished ROTC, and then he went back in the Army. And when the Army changed the Air Force, he joined the Air Force. So he has 3 services.
When you said Mariana, I thought there were some battles there.
There were some battles,
and
there.
So that
but it wasn't as bad as Iwo Jima or Okinawa.
Oh, I thought nothing was as bad as those places.
No, but he did have some combat.
So you're saying he had
but I think the thing that really impacted him was on this desolate island with 50 guys for a year. That was a stressor.
Okay.
And it was full of, he had malaria from that. And so it impacted him, but he got married, and then eventually, he kept studying and eventually became a psychologist. But I lived before I graduated from high school, I probably lived in 9 different places.
This is expected of a military kid.
Well, he wasn't in the military at the time.
Oh, okay. But you were like,
he just moved. He liked moving. And, so that's kind of, and then after that in high school in Bakersfield, I joined the Army, and I did good on the test, and they said, we'll send you to a cryptographic school. So I went to school in San Antonio, and then
cryptographic. Is that like breaking codes?
Codes, yeah.
We saw movies about that. World War II.
Yeah. Like
Morse code, they kind of decipher things. Right?
Yeah, that was kind of my area. And then after that, I went to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and then I got assigned to Field Station Berlin in Germany.
Let me rewind.
And I wasn't a Christian this whole time. I was an unbeliever.
There's a couple of things I wanted to touch on. I think you said you had an interesting experience with like a family member who went to jail. Was that your uncle?
Oh yeah. You want me to get that in?
No, I know. I just thought that was interesting. You don't want to talk about it, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't need to talk about it.
Okay, that's fine.
But I don't need to get that too much out.
My point is, I thought you had some interesting things. Okay, let's.
Well, no, what I will say is my Uncle Joe.
Yeah.
I won't say where he was incarcerated, but my dad and Uncle Joe, later in life, after he had left the prison, they would joke around with me.
Oh, yeah.
They would say, "Hey, Donnie."
Yeah, that's right.
"You don't want to be a jailbird now, do you?" And I say, "No, Daddy, I don't want to be a jailbird." And this was always an inside joke. I never understood it until decades later.
Yeah.
I was doing some genealogical work on Warren Kammer. Oh, I shouldn't have given you his name because you might find it. And so what happened was that I found a Warren Kammer that was in this prison. And I said, "Good grief, that's my Uncle Joe." And, sometimes in life we get shocked by the past that we never knew we had. And I learned the punchline for that joke. And I learned that I was kind of like the fool in that joke.
I see.
Because I was the one that didn't want to be a jailbird.
I just want to share that is not a lot of people have that long family history where they could trace things. I don't think Edward has that.
I don't know.
I'm saying you don't have like these like stories where you talk about your grandfather. It's nice to have these stories. Just saying, like I don't think everybody can have that like you do. I have the same thing.
Wow.
Let me also share real quick. Just kind of being a random. I remember you visited my father when he was sick with cancer, and
it was 2016.
2016, because he's a chaplain. So I called on Chaplain Don, and I think you said to me you were jealous of me, and I know that what you meant. Now, I could be offended by it, but you were actually giving me a very nice compliment, and it's not something people want to hear. But I understood what you're saying. You're saying even though your father is sick and dying, I think there's something really special there that you could see, or maybe I told you about the relationship I have with my dad, and you said you're jealous. What, do you remember this?
Yeah. So let me explain that. So, all of us in life, unless our father died before we're born, but we see our fathers into the next life, next world. We witness their death, and some of us are there and some of us are not there. And so I was observing you as you were struggling and grieving in preparatory grief before he died. And it was impacting you, definitely. Anybody watch knows. And I began to think and compare what you were experiencing with what I experienced, because I wasn't really with my dad. My dad was 200 miles away. I was in the middle of school.
How old were you?
I was preparing in seminary, so I was 30s.
Okay.
And I wish I had spent some more time with him before he died. And I made that comment to you because I valued very much and saw the importance of what you were doing, even though it was painful, that you were spending time with your father. And from my perspective, it's a very beautiful thing. Sometimes things can be beautiful and painful at the same time. And so in your life, Garrett, that's what I witnessed, that you were going through this very difficult time, and yet at the same time, there was great beauty in it.
I want to do a sidetrack relating to this off note, but so yesterday in Sunday school, we talked about Moses, and we talked about parenting styles and how that can affect your children. So I don't know if you're a psychologist. Apologize. Attachment theory.
Okay, I'm familiar with that, but I'm not a psychologist.
So, so an armchair psychologist.
I have counseling training.
So, it said that Moses, I believe, had some sort of insecure attachment style, which is probably indicative of many kids who don't feel loved. Like he's always avoidant, and he kind of ran away from things. And I think that happens a lot when kids don't feel connected with their parents. They kind of just naturally are afraid of commitment. And Edward asked me, Garrett, what's your attachment style? I said, I'm 100% secure. And my response to what you're saying is that the reason why I feel I'm 100% secure is because I felt all the pain of losing my mom and dad. Yes. I didn't run away from it. And number two, I felt like it was a privilege. So if I didn't have secure attachment style, I wouldn't be able to be dialed in that much because of how painful it was. But the fact that I cared and didn't run away shows that I'm secure. So I think maybe that's related a little bit to what you're saying.
And so this raises another aspect.
Yeah.
Your mom.
Yes.
Your mom recently died.
Yeah.
And so you've gone through the death of your father and your mother. And, I would say that just from being with you and watching you, if you can say being involved in a death is beautiful, I would say that your life experience with your parents has been beautiful.
I want to chime in. It's beautiful if you allow for God to untie God's timetable, and you continue to work through the process. So if you're asking me, does it feel beautiful? Not really at the moment, but given enough time, and my opinion is it'll make me a better father, better person in hindsight. But you got to let the process keep going.
I think it's a testimony, a beautiful testimony. You know, in the catacombs in Rome, the persecuted Christians often would leave remembrances of their loved ones, and they would tell the tales of the saints who died. And, you know, death is something that's an important part of the Christian existence because we have a way to grapple with it.
Yes. So, yeah, we don't have to talk too much more. Everyone just thought, you know, you were there. Just real quick, I'll let you share anything, reflection
about you teaching.
Just death, and I guess Don saying that it made me a better person, or
you can change the subject also.
Let's throw it out there.
I'm thinking about Everett and his grandpa.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you said this or he said it, but it was an honor to be able to
wipe his ass.
Wipe his ass, was it? Yeah.
Changing diapers. It is. I said it, and Everett agreed, and he said to me,
yeah. But it sounds funny, right? But I get it. I understand.
He would call me going,
it's real.
It's real.
It's real. Yeah. And, you know, so often we live in a world that doesn't want to be real. But you're talking about something that is a reality of life.
Yeah, it is a privilege. I would say this, I want to move on, but the pain of going through that is nothing, in my opinion, compared to the pain of regret.
Yes.
So sure. Does it always feel good? Answers no. And if you enjoy it, even better. But if you were to look back 20, 30 years from now and you realize you dropped the ball, I think that's worse than both of those. So in my opinion, as a Christian, we don't want to have regrets. We want to do our best. So, but Everett is a great guy.
Yeah.
His grandpa, which is also my grandpa. Yeah. And he's a better person for it. Well,
yeah.
All right, Don, let's continue. So you
so we were a very serious topic. Now we got to move into a little more, a little lighter topic.
You're not a jailbird, Don. You didn't go to jail.
No, I didn't.
You never went to jail.
No, I worked in a jail. I worked at as an intern at Fort Leavenworth Military Disciplinary Barracks.
Let me pause that real quick. 3 greatest days of my dad's life. I'll share 2. The day I was born, and the day he got his papers from Vietnam War, and it didn't say NAM, it said Fort Leavenworth, and he praised Jesus because all the black men were crying. They said, we're going to NAM, we're going to die, and he was like so happy. He went to Fort Leavenworth as MP.
Wow.
He got really good at spades. You know that game? Is that a military game?
Yeah, it's a military game. They love it.
Anyways, go ahead. My dad went there, is all I'm saying.
Oh, really?
MP.
Well, that's an important base for the United States.
Is that Kansas?
Military. It's in Kansas.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
So you worked in a jail?
So I was there in a prison working as a kind of a 2 to 3 month internship. And I learned a lot. And then later on in life, I was a chaplain for the largest MP battalion in the Army, which was in Germany, in Mannheim. And I also had connection with the military disciplinary barracks there and did pastoral ministry for the soldiers and the inmates.
Walk me through I want to assume, Don, you value education a lot.
Education's important, I think,
because
it opens doors. So and it answers questions.
Walk me through your education journey, starting from high school and to college, and because you went to college 4 times, 4 different places.
A lot of college.
Wow. So walk us through your thought process and growing up and why you did what.
So, as a kid in California, I went to work when I was in first grade, and so from first grade to later high school, I delivered papers in like 5 different towns and cities. And I was never a good student in elementary school. In fact, I remember one time I had to do a report, and it was on the NASA, on spaceships. And my teacher was really a mean woman, but she was a good woman also. But I wasn't able to do it well, and I got a D on the report.
What grade is this?
This was in 5th grade.
Okay.
But what happened to me is that when I got to junior high, I started reading science fiction. And science fiction. This is 70s,
okay,
early 70s, and it touched me. You know, I was reading people like Asimov and Bradbury, and I began to like reading. And from beginning to like reading, I started reading historical novels. I remember I read the Horatio Hornblower series. And so by the time I got into high school, I was very interested in history. And all my other classes I did okay, but every single history class I got an A in.
Let you know, I'm big into history. I got an award for history.
Oh,
and
okay. I didn't know that.
Just kind of off the topic, but all my AP classes, most of them came from history classes. My AP credits. I was one of the only guys that got a 5 in U.S. history. That was a hard topic, but I love history.
Did you like?
Well, back then I liked world history. I like history of war, and so it helped me to be a successful student, and so I improved all my grades eventually. But in high school, my senior year, I skipped nearly half the year. I played hooky, but in California they didn't care as long as you get the credit. You know, I got the credit, so. Right after that, I went to junior college or community college. And that's when I decided to join the Army before the divorce came in our home.
Did you have to pay for school back then? Was it expensive?
I paid for school in junior college.
Was that affordable back then? Could you pay yourself while working, or did you?
I paid myself. Yeah. And then I only stayed a semester, and then I decided to go in the military, and then they sent me to language school, German. So that's college also. The Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California.
Was that financial reasons you went to the military?
Yes. So I could get the GI Bill and go back to college after 3 years.
Because I wasn't sure. Go ahead.
And so I served in the Army for 3 years, and then was stationed in West Berlin, and got out of the Army, and eventually came back to the United States and studied and taught overseas English and China.
What was your undergrad? I still have no idea what was
my undergrad was kind of a mixture of science background with missions and Bible. It was a Bible college I went to.
I see. So you went to the military and you finished your education after your military.
Yes.
And that's when you became
I became a Christian when I was in Germany. So I was on leave. So I was working at the field station and went on leave to Amsterdam and then London. And in London, I met 2 people on the street, and they invited me to church, 3 people on the street. And I went, argued with them, went to a Bible study, argued. Then this next Saturday, sitting in the field at a place called Greenbelt, prayed. It was a music festival, and prayed and asked Jesus to come into my heart, repented of my sin, and a burden lifted. And I was completely transformed. And that evening I got baptized. After I was saved, I got baptized in a bathtub with a bunch of commune people and a long-haired hippie dude playing the guitar.
What year is this? And how old were you?
I was 21, and it was 75.
I became a Christian when I was 21. Real quick, I just trying to understand the background.
Oh, sorry, 78.
Okay. When was the Jesus movement?
The Jesus movement is an important movement. And my community that I came into contact with was connected to that tradition.
Isn't that in California?
It's California, but it went all over the world.
What year did that start?
the 60s, late 60s.
So I feel like there should have been a little bit of like you were a little exposed to Christianity at that.
Not much before I met the Christians.
But if you were in California, okay. So the Jesus movement is like a very informal, spontaneous, what they would say, maybe Holy Spirit led kind of.
Yeah, it was all over. It reached around the world. There's different answers to that, but
that was like
Chuck Smith's Calvary Chapel.
Okay.
On the coast there in Southern California is a big piece of that trajectory of the Jesus.
So you're kind of a benefactor of the Jesus movement.
I would say yes, because the church that I became a believer in came out of a church in Durban, South Africa that had been influenced by the Jesus movement. And so the pastor there wound up going to London. And in London, that's where I met Christians, and amazingly, my life was changed. It's amazing how one spark can reach someone that you never would expect.
So tell me, what was it that made that moment special? Were you in a little dark spot because you're in the military? Was it just someone was very convincing?
I was looking for truth and lost. And I met some people that cared for me, that they didn't argue with me. There was no argument. I argued with them. and they simply, they gave me tea and cookies.
So like today,
I gave you guys Panera bread, pastry, and tea. And I think the church kind of, sometimes churches don't understand the importance of a non-rational, non-cognitive approach to ministry. Just caring for people will reach people.
I think that word to me is hospitality.
Hospitality. That's a gift of the Spirit, by the way. I think it is, at least. Hospitality, caring is an important thing that the Holy Spirit does to the church, but giving people that have those skills.
Any questions, Edward? Any thoughts?
No.
So you felt that this was a very divine moment for you, because some people can make it more cognitive, but I'm just trying to understand. I'm wondering if it was more of a I didn't expect this at all.
Was it just you, or were there any of your buddies that also converted?
I had a buddy that was going around Amsterdam and England with, but he left. He ran out of money, so I said goodbye, Derek. And he was a roommate, actually. And so for me, when I became a believer, nobody asked me to become a believer. I was just sitting in a field with contemporary Christian music group with hundreds of people sitting on the grass at Greenbelt Music Festival. And just by myself, I closed my eyes, bowed my head, said, Jesus, come into my life. Forgive me for my sin. And boom.
Was there a message going on, or you just really felt?
No message, nothing like that.
So
I just made a commitment.
Yeah.
And so, the way that people come to Christ, there's many different ways. A lot of people, think that, getting baptized in water is the way that you become a Christian. Well, the truth is, you could get baptized and be a believer and believe at that time. But being a believer doesn't have anything to do with receiving a sacrament. It's something much more than an ordinance or a sacrament. It's something that happens before that. And then you later can celebrate communion because you have a relationship with the living God, Jesus Christ.
So for you, did you feel that was a very supernatural moment?
It was a supernatural moment. I never will forget that. And plus, there's a lot of little things that followed that. So I had to go back to my unit in West Berlin, and I had two roommates. One guy's nickname was Lucifer Beelzebub, and the other guy's nickname was F the Army, FTA, they called him for short. And you can imagine what F is. And so when I got back to my unit in West Berlin, I knocked on the door, and FTA answered, and He said, Don, you're not here anymore. You got moved upstairs. What? So while I was gone, while I became a Christian, all my stuff and everything had been moved upstairs to the room where the two guys were Christians. Mm-hmm. And both of them became full-time ministers. One became a Presbyterian minister mm-hmm. in South Carolina, a pastor mm-hmm. and a significant church leader. And then the other, James Thacker, has been an Assemblies of God missionary. He's pioneered hundreds of churches from West Africa, and now he's in Madagascar, helping with the Bible college for the Madagascar Assemblies of God, and having a strategic impact in that country for Christianity. And these, it's just amazing that God put me there with them. And so, God will protect us and lead us when we give our lives to him.
I think my spiritual birthday, this is what I tell people. I think you being saved to me is more important than your wedding. It's the most important. My testimony, my conversion to me is more, when you get baptized, to me is a reflection of that, but that to me is more important than a wedding or any other life event.
That's the most important thing.
So I guess you're right there.
So let me tell you, there was a time when I was trying to figure out, after I became a Christian, your problems don't end, right?
No, I have no problems.
After you become a Christian, you still have to find God's way for you. And I remember there was one time in my life, years later, where I just put some paper on the wall, white paper, and I decided, where's God sending me? And so I put a cross in the middle. This is when I became a Christian. And then I developed to the left and right of that, different lines of my interest, my focus, my encounter with God, my friends, the classes I like, the things that I enjoy. And I prayed over this about which way I should go with my career. And that's really at the point where I decided to become a military chaplain.
How old were you during this?
I was around 30 something.
So you got saved when you're 21. So 10 years went by. What
10 years
what
later.
Happened between those 10 years?
Well, I worked in Berlin for a while, high-rise construction as a Krankenpfleger in a German hospital.
You're not military anymore?
I got out. I got a European out in Germany. And then I went to college. Then I went and I taught English as a second language. Then I taught high school, got married, and then went to seminary. And that's when I did that.
When were you a bus driver and threw people out the bus?
When I was I told you that? I shouldn't have told you that. Goodness.
You were driving the bus?
While I was in my 4-year college.
I try to pay attention.
I did different jobs. and actually one of the jobs was I was a bus driver. And I drove kids on the bus, and I learned quickly, Now, this is not politically correct today. You would get in trouble. But somehow I managed to survive. If you want to keep the kids quiet, you go over the speed bumps fast.
The one in the back,
because they're holding on for dear life. And then I remember also, I worked for Jack in the Box, and people would go, this is when Jack in the Box had the scandal with kangaroo meat, and people would come by and they'd say, hey, you got a kangaroo jack for me? And then also during this time, I had to have a lot of jobs because I worked to get through school, because I didn't have many loans at all. I got some scholarships. But another thing that I did was I worked in the morning cooking breakfast and washing dishes in the afternoon in this college. Now, the dishwashers were kind of low class people, not really, but I worked. People weren't paying for me, so I had to work to get through everything. And then in the summers, I worked for Central Freight in Dallas, loading in the heat of the summer semi trucks into loading tires into semi trucks. And so that's how I made money going to school, and I could have a car and have a life. So
was it hard working and going to school with the time, like management?
I managed it. I did okay. I had good grades, so I can manage it. It's not easy.
You still didn't say when you threw the kid out the bus, though.
Oh, I
you don't want to
tell you that. No. Well, so there was a fight. There was a fight in the bus, and one of these kids was a young high schooler, and he was beating up a little kid. Mm-hmm. I told him to stop. He cursed me, and I took him. I threw him out of the bus. Physically, I threw him out of the bus.
This is why you're a Christian, right?
No, yeah, I was a Christian at the time.
This is before you're sanctified.
No. I'm still working on that.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to tease you show you I still remember some of your stories. I don't know if you told. I think you told me that.
I told you that. Goodness, man, you got a steel trap mind. I'm not going to tell him anything else.
Well, in your book you talk about the importance of history and remembering where we come from.
Yeah, it's true. We got to remember our past.
All right, so you wanted to be a chaplain. Now, before we say that, did you want to do something in ministry, or did you say, I just want to be a chaplain? You're like, go ahead.
I wanted to be a military chaplain and come back and do that because I was familiar with the military.
So now
and also I would say I pastored before that. Okay. So I pastored in a Korean church for 2 years. And then I pastored in a church in Southern California for 4 years while I was a National Guard chaplain with the California Army National Guard. And my unit was an armored battalion in San Diego. I don't know if you remember the picture of a tank rolling down the street in San Diego. Someone had stolen a tank. That was my battalion.
Is this in the 90s?
This is in the 90s.
Yeah, it was on like Police Chase.
Police Chase.
Yeah, I saw it. It was hard to stop, but they got stuck in the median.
They shot him accidentally. My first sergeant, I think it was my first sergeant, who was also a sheriff's deputy.
That was a good video.
Shot him. But yeah, that was my unit's tank. And what's interesting, it's California is kind of crazy. I mean, I'm not there now, so if you live in California, more power to you. But when I was in California after this, they disbanded that battalion, and the tanks all found their way into the Pacific Ocean as homes for fish.
That's weird.
And because the California National Guard didn't pay for a fence around the armory where the tank was stolen. So they should have probably put a fence around it.
So I'm just trying to connect the dots. So, chaplain, did that have to do a little bit with your psychology background?
I didn't really have psychology background. I had some counseling background.
Sorry, I thought you said that was part of
my dad was a psychologist. I was not a psychologist.
Okay. Sorry, counseling. So what made you want to do chaplain versus any
military chaplain?
So
I wanted to work with military because I knew the military. I cared for soldiers, and it's something I felt called to do.
Okay.
And I was trying to do it, but in order to do that in my denomination, you have to have years of experience as a pastor. And so I had 6 years of experience pastoring 2 churches. And from there, I got picked up for active duty. And my first assignment was a combat engineer battalion in Fort Hood, Texas. After that, an MP battalion. After that, a striker scout battalion in Washington State, Fort Lewis. Then a quartermaster center in school, Fort Lee. And then 101st Airborne in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And from there, we deployed I've had a few deployments, Afghanistan, Croatia, and a few other spots.
Any regrets or things you really enjoyed about being a chaplain?
The one thing I enjoyed was the community among chaplains. We worked together. A lot of the time, if you're a pastor of a local church,
yes,
and you're by yourself, a small church,
you
don't have kind of a community of fellow pastors. Now, in my denomination, I always have. So this is the benefit of being a part of a denomination. That is that you have connection and relationship with other ministers to go through different issues that you can work together to help resolve the issues. You have friends, people that you can connect to. If you're independent by yourself, you need to try to find connections with people, but not every chaplain, not every pastor will do that.
Now, you're part of the Assemblies of God.
I am.
What made you decide to enroll in that versus any other denomination?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a lot of good Christian groups out there. None are perfect. For me, what I liked about the Assemblies of God was that, first of all, in its doctrine, it has a commitment to experience the Holy Spirit. So its doctrine believes in the importance of the Spirit, the spiritual gifts, and the experience of God, which is in their theology. The second thing is the accountability. You know, I did not want to be an independent minister because I know how dangerous that is. You know, you need to be current. So I'm ordained, but in my denomination, every year you have to be verified as ordained. In other words, your church has to recognize you as a valid minister who is basically faithfully doing what they're called to do.
Which church validates you?
Assemblies of God, denomination.
Oh, I thought you meant like local church.
No, not a local church.
Okay.
You know, because I'm a chaplain, but it's every as a denomination, you're underneath that umbrella. And for me, the Potomac Network is where I'm involved. You know, in the Potomac Network, we have over 500 churches and over 1,500 ministers that I'm kind of connected to. And then the third thing, which is important, is the missions philosophy, which is indigenous missions. The goal is not to set up Western-led churches by missionaries. The goal is to serve the national leaders and help them be effective in building their own Christian communities.
Just want to say that I think that, you know what, I thought that was supposed to be, when I hear that, the strategy with like military. Am I correct? You want to teach their own people to not always like depend on the United States. I thought that was like,
so the U.S. should do that, but we don't do that. And we're getting into politics now. That's a dangerous field.
But relating to that, that's why I wanted to have my Christian library. Just go, like, how much can I do? I can't do that much. Like, wouldn't it be better if I help you all be better at what you do?
This is the one in Kenya?
Yeah, in Kenya. So just saying that, I think that's probably the best. I hope that's not controversial, but I think that's probably the best way of working with people sustainably.
I think it's brilliant to do that. Now, you're talking about English books.
Yeah, they speak English, don't Kenya?
Yeah, they do speak English, but not everybody does.
No, they do. They do. Yeah. Anyone who's educated speaks English.
Yeah, anybody who's educated, but not everybody. They have indigenous language too.
Yeah. Swahili.
Yep.
But anyways, just saying, I that makes sense. You had questions, Edward, or anything?
No.
So just want to, Holy Spirit. That's something I think is all over the place with different Christian denominations, and you probably talk about that in the book.
I talk about
it. Yeah, but any thoughts on that? Why that attribute? Is it because your background makes it important? Go ahead.
I would say that in the history of Christianity, the Holy Spirit has been absolutely important in causing the church to grow and to expand. It's just like the example when Paul was in Asia, and the Holy Spirit is the one who spoke to him and had him go to Europe. And so for the advance of the church and for the health of the church, there has to be a good understanding, experience, and theology of the Spirit.
Okay.
In my case, I'm not a cessationist, which believes that the gifts of the Spirit have stopped. You know, some Christians say that when the Bible came together, there was no more need for the gifts of the Spirit, but that's can't be shown scripturally at all. So I believe that the gifts of the Spirit are still there to equip and guide the church,
Yeah.
that these gifts are given by the Spirit.
I had a debate with Ian about that topic, and
Gifts from the Spirit.
I'm a little bit more open-minded. So I know some people are kind of closed-minded. He liked these books from this person, and some Christians push that narrative a little bit, the cessationalism. And
I would just let me just address that, because this is important.
Mm-hmm.
The cessational theology in the world Christianity is a minor theology.
Basically saying they don't believe in miracles.
Basically, it's a blip.
Yeah.
It's a Western blip.
Uh-huh.
And most Christians around the world believe in the supernatural, believe in miracles, and believe that gifts are effective today. A lot of these people that take this position that is a cessationist position, when in other words, the gifts stopped.
With the Acts of Apostles.
Yeah, with the Acts of, well, first of all, there's no biblical evidence for that at all. And generally those people, they're following the teaching of a person called John MacArthur.
That's what I say. He's kind of popular, I guess.
Yeah, he's a popular conservative preacher.
Yeah, I don't care. I just heard that. Yeah,
he represents a very small percentage of Christians, and there's so much just very effective argument and discussion of those views that it really, if you're honest to what is out there, intellectually, theologically, then you have to discount that perspective that says that the God stopped working in supernatural ways.
Well, I don't believe that, because why pray?
That's part of it.
Anyways, I want to share a thought, and I want to hear your opinion. So from my understanding, from talking to other pastors, I think most pastors quit within 5 years in the ministry. And so Dan Ho, one of my favorite pastors, he was telling me that. I don't know if you remember.
I remember Dan.
Real good friend of mine.
He's right.
He passed away. He did surveys, and we talked about this. And then he also said, so if most people quit within 5 years, that means those who are in it very likely are burned out. And so what does that mean for current pastors? This is my assumption. Is that
let me just stop you there.
Okay.
This is not only pastors.
Teachers.
This is lay leaders like you.
Oh, no, I know.
Whoa, hold on.
Uh-huh.
This is not just on pastors.
Uh-huh.
This is on lay leaders like you.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens is that the demand of the ministry is so much that those pastors get burnt out.
Right.
Because they're doing, and they don't take an opportunity to refresh or to grow in terms of knowledge and experience with God. And the same way, someone like Garrett, who's involved in working with young people, and I saw your presentation a few days ago, and you showed a group of young people, and you said none of these people followed me or Christ or whatever you said. The first one I kind of questioned when I heard that, but but the thing is that sometimes the difficulty of caring for people and reaching out to people does cause us to kind of stop our growth. Mm-hmm. And we should not stop our growth. We need to continue to grow and learn and experience God. And that takes time. Mm-hmm. So if you're 100% engaged in ministry, you have no time. Mm-hmm. And of course, you're going to burn out. There's all kinds of preachers that burn out all over the nation. You have to be able to say no to grow. And so I'm so happy that you've been able to take some classes. I hope that's helped you. But I hope you don't allow that opportunity to stop you from doing it in the future when you get busier and busier and busier, because you need to have a balanced life. Mm-hmm. You have your ministry, And some people, they have their ministry and they forget their kids and they forget their wife and they forget their dog. Right?
You definitely forget my dog.
Yeah, you can't do that. You have to limit your ministry to a certain time, and you got to give time to your spouse and your baby and other things where you're learning and growing and you're being nurtured. You need that. But if you just totally go hog wild for ministry, you'll last, a few months, a few years, but you'll be burnt out and you'll quit. And then become a realtor.
So that's what I wanted to get to.
Go into real estate. A lot of preachers are realtors.
No, I heard that. And I wasn't sure it was from you, but I read that.
No, I did tell you that.
I read that recently. So what I was trying to get to was that I think so this is what I hear. I don't know if it's true, but whatever. Let's just continue with the logic. Because pastors invest so much time into their education for ministry, once they get burned out, they have no choice but to stay with it because they have a family. They don't have enough opportunity to start over. So what I'm saying is, I think a lot of pastors, if you agree with me, are probably burned out, and it's really difficult. And so, one of the things I'm wondering, if what you're saying is you like the Assemblies of God because there's some kind of support system to avoid that. But what I want to ask you, if that's true, that a lot of people in ministry are kind of in a tight spot.
This is what happens.
Yeah.
You want me to tell you what happens?
Go ahead.
So that's all you know. And you burn out.
Yeah.
You just continue to coast.
Right.
You're speaking religious words and saying glory, glory, and speaking the words of faith without having the experience.
Yes.
And then you become jaded. And you don't really minister to people. They're bored because there's no passion, there's no truth in your ministry and your message. And there's a lot of preachers like that out there. There's a lot of people that are just doing what they think they need to do because they've always done it.
Can you see that very clearly as you're in the profession, in the field?
I think I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of my opinion. It's like, I don't make an assumption just because you're a quote unquote pastor. I don't assume you're really spiritual. I just assume this is what you're doing. I don't make any assumptions about their own personal spiritual health or anything. They could be all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So what are the dangers of ministry? And you said that. So I think what you're saying is one of the most important things is to be part of a team. I think you said, don't be a lone ranger.
So a part of a team with accountability. See, this is the thing that made people, made the Anglican Church got upset with John Wesley. He started these groups, connected to churches all around Europe, class groups, where people would come together and they would share their life and they would actually ask questions about their faithfulness. Are you praying? Are you loving people? Are you helping people? And, all Christians need to be in some kind of small group that challenges them to grow.
Yeah.
And this is, Wesley has written on this actually, so you can actually find what he wrote. And a lot of successful groups that are campus ministry groups, they employ these techniques like InterVarsity does, Campus Crusade does, churches do all over the place, ministerial groups do. They try to bring people together for accountability. And so that's why someone like you, you're not a formal minister, but you're doing ministry. You have to make sure that you have some accountability connection with other ministers and other people doing what you do. You need that. And so your people need to hold you accountable and you need to hold them accountable. It's a mutual accountability thing.
I think,
I don't mean to meddle, but I just throw that out there.
No, it's true. I think that my opinion is this quote, say, you show me your friends, I'll show you your future. I think more important is you show me your role models, I'll show you. So I think I don't really care for accountability that much in the sense that it's more important to be very selective for me to focus on who you want to be close to. But I think it's very important to develop close relationships with people that you really get along with and understand you. And so that to me is accountable. When I say accountability, I don't think about just every person because not everyone knows you. So I'm very selective and careful with what I share. But my thought is it true that it can be a very lonely profession, ministry? And I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, it can be, definitely. Especially if you are a lone ranger.
Yeah. And that happens probably a lot. And this is my opinion, okay? This is what I think. It's like a praise team leader. They have to pretend a lot because everyone's looking to them to be like, yay, Jesus. And so I think there is some pressure to perform. And so I think a lot of pastors are afraid to be honest because there's a certain pressure to perform spiritually and they're not allowed to show weakness, I think.
Yeah, this is a difficult subject.
But you don't have to go into it.
No. This is, hopefully a praise team leader is taking time to be spiritually healthy. And hopefully the pastoral leadership is encouraging them and everything is in a healthy basis.
Yeah.
That's why we need relationships. And that's why, sometimes it's beneficial to have a couple, a husband and wife engaged, because the wife is a Christian and the wife may not be doing the ministry, the music ministry, but that wife can still be there to help her husband with some form of Christian accountability. It's rooted in their marriage relationship, but we need to care for each other in every status.
I think there's a lot of burnout and performance-driven kind of careers. So,
but some people, they energize with the performing. So some people, they may be burned out, but if they go and they can do their performance in public, and then they're on a high for a little while, and then they, as the week drags out, they go to the low, and then another service comes up, they hit the high again. That can be very dangerous.
I think that's probably should be some part of doing ministry that you are extroverted, and there should be some sort of reward you get from doing a good job. But you're saying too much.
But this is why I think it's so important to have continuing education and mentorship in the church, in Christians, among those people doing visible forms of ministry like that.
Yeah.
You everybody needs to be growing.
So my quote, Muhammad Ali, you like him? He's your kind of, no,
I don't know. I mean, he's a hero of America.
Oh, so he got a quote. He says, anyone who's the same at 50 as the same as they are at 20 has wasted 30 years of his life.
I think he's probably right.
So I think that,
but there's mercy though. There's mercy. If you have that realization that at 50, man, I really wasted 30 years, at least you've made it to that point, and you're better than a whole lot of other people who are still there, and you just move on and God will open the door and make a way for you. So don't, I don't think people should, if you happen to wake up at 80 and say, good grief.
Yeah.
For 70 years, I wasted my life. Well, praise God. You connected with God now.
Yeah.
And God is with you. And who knows? He may use you in a way that you can never imagine as an 80-year-old.
Yeah.
So I don't think we need to feel so guilty about our past, because God wants to free us from that. It's the whole story of that I preached Sunday on Hosea, and go, he wound up in this relationship, but God used it. A terrible situation for some, but God is able to use any situation.
Yeah. Any thought that word?
Since you're talking about the sermon, this is, I guess, not related, but what did it mean in Corinthians when women have to keep their mouths quiet?
Corinthians 10:34.
Yeah. So see, that's where I'll be honest with you. I told people I wasn't going to answer that question. And I said, you all need to go find an answer.
Okay.
By looking at some materials out there, some helps. Scholars throughout the history of Christianity have talked about this stuff.
Okay.
Some people might say, well, it's because, women are supposed to be quiet in church. But actually, Paul is not saying that. He's dealing with a specific problem, a specific case. And, if you look at some biblical scholars, some commentaries, they discuss this topic.
That was my midterm.
That was your midterm? That
was my midterm for Ascent.
Okay.
For John, what's his last name?
Oh, yeah. Bertram.
If you really care, I can, whatever. But
well, no, I mean, I have like
good for you.
I have looked at like different commentaries, and the answer that made the most sense to me was women didn't have access to the word. So like in church they would interrupt and just ask a lot of questions and something like that.
That's one perspective that people are thinking that might be good, but there's a problem with that also. Most people didn't have access to the word. It's not just women. There was scrolls, and it wasn't like you go to my library and you see 1,000, 2,000 books, right? People didn't have books. Very rarely would people have much at all in terms of a book.
No worries. We can talk about it if you care.
But that's a good. Yeah. But so I challenge you to to see what Gordon Fee, who's also who's written several commentators. He died recently. Gordon Fee, Gordonfee, is a really great Christian leader. He deals with this. Craig Keener deals with it. The book that I showed Sunday morning.
I think I know Don's leanings, obviously, but.
I'm very positive toward women doing pastoral ministry and speaking in church. I think that's a good thing.
Okay. So I want to take a little detour and then come back to back to academia as we finish with the book. But
are we good? Are we doing good on time?
We're good.
Okay.
So I didn't know if you want to talk about if it's too personal, your first marriage and second marriage, or no.
I can talk about that.
Briefly, I think it's very interesting that. Just the fact that you have two Chinese wives, you're part of a Chinese church. I wasn't sure if, and I know there's it's not an easy road. Your romantic life, but if you want to touch on it as deep as you want to go.
So I'll tell you. So when I was a lost soldier, walking the streets of London, outside of Earl's Court tube station, I meet this Australian woman. And a Singaporean Chinese woman, and a guy that was kind of retarded. That's not a good word today. I don't know.
No, it's coming back. The word retard's back, I guess.
and they were passing out tracts. And I took a tract. I argued with them a little bit. What do you think you guys talking to me about God for? There's no God.
Yeah.
And they invited me to church, to their church called the Invisible Church, which is kind of an interesting name. And that afternoon, I began thinking, I said, those girls were pretty. They were pretty girls. So I decided to go, and I started walking toward the church. It was 6:00, and I was thinking to myself, oh no, this is kind of crazy to go to this church. Why do I want to do that? And I turned around. And I noticed this beady-eyed guy following me, and I got spooked, whatever that meant. But I remember that. And then a thought popped in my head. What do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? So I turned around and went back into the Anglican church building that they were renting. And the guy was playing guitar, and then they had a lousy sermon. And afterward, they had tea and cookies. And so I ate the cookies and tea. I was hungry at the time. And I talked to the Chinese girl, and I talked to the Australian girl. And then they invited me to a Bible study on Wednesday. So I went to this Bible study. I upset it with stupid questions. And then they invited me to a music festival in southern England at a place called Greenbelt. And that Saturday went. And that's when I gave my life to Christ. And I just kept, as a pen pal, the Chinese woman that I met from Singapore. We just wrote
This is
1978.
Yeah. Okay.
We just wrote, and we weren't interested in each other. And I went back to Berlin, stayed in Berlin a few years, went to college, finished college, then went to China. And while I was in China teaching in Changchun, the thought occurred to me, she's this girl, Florence, she's a really nice person. And she's working in a church. She was working for Jackie Pullinger in Hong Kong at the time. And so we met in Hong Kong and we just decided to get married. And I went back to America, taught that summer, went to Singapore, asked your parents to marry me. And the mom wasn't too happy because I was a poor preacher. Man. But the dad...
How old were you?
I was like 30-something, 30. And what was interesting is that the mom looked at the daughter and said, she was older than me by 1 year. She said, "You're over 30, so you're only used tea leaves now, and so you can marry the guilo." And so we got married, and we had a son. And tragically, we had a few bouts of cancer, and she died in 2001.
So you were married how many years?
Oh. 86, 15.
Anything you want to share about being a dad, since I'm a new dad also? Other than you're very proud of your son, and he's got a civil engineering degree. And
spend as much time with him as you can.
Yeah.
And even when you're like sitting and doing nothing at a soccer meet or a swim match,
yeah,
you're doing something because you're there with him.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to like put a bunch of books in your backpack. And you need to go serve and be with him and take him around and drive him to all the meetings, and don't let your wife do everything.
Mm-hmm.
You actually need to help your wife out, take care of her. That's my recommendation. You guys need to be a team, team tag team.
If my daughter does do sports.
And so Josephine, a few years later, we met through a mutual friend in Hong Kong, and we got married. And the beautiful thing is that Josephine is a great people person.
Yes.
And so she was able to connect with my son.
What's your son's name again?
Kyle.
Kyle, that's right.
Kyle Kammer. And you can find him on the internet. He's a significant engineer right now in the United States, with a specific focus on green concrete and quality. So what happened was that he got married after he finished university, and now we have 4 grandkids. So is it coincidence you've married 2 Chinese women and part of Chinese church, or do you have a fascination? Well, no, I've done ministry with Chinese before. So while I was in college, 4 years, I was in a Chinese church, and I led a campus ministry with mainland Chinese. And then later, then when I was pastoring in Southern California, before I became an active duty Army chaplain, I preached regularly in the Evangelical Formosan Church. So I've always had a connection with Chinese. What have you learned about Chinese? Not Chinese, but what have you learned that's benefited you working with Chinese people? Like, I'll give you an example, Edward. We like to do math. Like, we're just very calculating, like, hey, let's not buy that right now and save,
Don't spend a lot.
So Chinese people are good at, math. So I try to impart that onto Edward. What has benefited you from working with the Chinese people? Or taken away? I think the sense of family and connection is very important. The Guanxi relationship is very important. I mean, the Chinese community has a lot of very beautiful things. So it's not like I happened to choose the Chinese community because I could have chosen any community. I just happened to fall into this.
Yeah.
And now I'm speaking Chinese. I actually, after I finished my doctorate and my book, I decided I always wanted to speak Chinese, and so I'm studying Chinese every day, 3 hours a week with a teacher from Ningbo, China, and I am becoming conversant in.
We'll see you in the Mandarin congregation pretty soon.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah,
it's still hard.
When I say without the translator.
Would you say it's harder to learn because like later in life, like is Chinese something you want to learn when you're much younger? Because I don't know.
People can learn.
Okay.
Forever. The problem is if you stop learning, it's difficult to get back into that form. But, we as Christians have to be continually learning. There's really no good scenario where a Christian stops learning. And we need to really keep developing skill sets to be better. This idea that you just finish your college and then you're done with learning is not Christian, and it's not right. And it hurts the church because then you have a lot of people in church that don't grow.
Yeah.
And the worst thing for a pastor is to be in a church where people don't want to grow. That's like, it's terrible, because no matter what you preach, you can preach your heart out and people are just going to say, oh, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to do the same old stuff. And that's not healthy.
Well, you got a growth mindset, Edward?
I'd like to think so.
I'm going to take your pictures right here.
Okay.
I'm going to take your pictures and I'm going to put it on Facebook and basically say, look what happened today. This group of people came over and they interrogated me for an hour and a half.
Okay. So let's move on to the book. And maybe I'll give you some things I thought was interesting. I'll share 3 things I took away.
Okay.
But if you want to add, sure. The first thing I took away is God sometimes works in informal or unexpected ways. The second thing I thought about is anything new is often met with opposition. And the third thing I think important to you is this idea of that we need to understand our history. Otherwise, it's almost a tragedy. And you said that at the end of the book, you also talk about at the beginning how very few Pentecostal people take seriously documentation or recording their history. So this is Don Cameron's book. I just say it one more time. The Full Gospel Assembly of Washington, D.C.
Is there a link to buy this book online?
Yeah, there's everywhere.
We will put that in the description.
So anything you want to share from those points I took away, or anything else you think was important from that book?
Well, I will say, so when I use the word Pentecostal, it's a very broad term. So it's not a narrow term. So world Christianity today, that is probably the dominant kind of experience because it goes from, it's in the Protestant community, it's in the Catholic community. It's a very big term. So many Christians have association with that kind of Christianity, especially if you believe in miracles and God, speaking to you. But too often in the early 1900s, these churches that were very revivalistic churches, they would grow and they would reach people. And often they started on the other side of the railroad tracks and they reached people that were in great spiritual need. And those churches, they began to grow and they moved to better locations and began to expand because it's enthusiastic ministry that reaches people that are transformed by the power of God. And they come into Christ. And instead of spending all of their money gambling or on whiskey and on women, they begin to save and they send their kids to school. They take care of their kids and the churches become very healthy. Now, the problem is that many of these churches, they kind of have this attitude that we're all about doing ministry. We want to do the ministry, the work of God. And they don't take a second thought to preserve the evidence of their ministry. They don't take much effort to write the history and keep the history. So, after a decade or two, these churches will go up into the attic and they'll find all the church records and they'll throw them out into the garbage because, we don't need church records. And so churches like this don't have many local church histories. But if you go to Methodist churches, you go to Anglican churches, you go to Presbyterian churches, you go to a Southern Baptist church, you go to a Lutheran church, all these churches have PhDs that have written long histories of the volunteers, the board members, all the information that they still have kept in archives is still there. And so they have like histories. But these churches, and when I say Pentecostal, the classical Pentecostal churches would be Church of God, Cleveland, Tennessee, Church of God in Christ, Kojic, Assemblies of God, Foursquare Gospel, Open Bible, a whole lot of other, churches, large and small. They typically don't have their church history. So, I just think it's important to keep the church history, because if you don't keep it, then you forget the sacrifice and the ministry and the work that was done. For example, there's a story in my book. I tell the story of this Black woman who was basically pastoring a church in 1910, 11 in DC, when Black women weren't supposed to be pastoring churches. And because it was like obscene to have a woman speaking. And this woman tells a story of how one day somebody came into her church and he pulled a gun out and held it to her head and said, "I'm going to rub out the preacher woman." And he pulled the trigger and it didn't go off. And he ran away, fled. And years later, he came back and he told her what happened. And he said, "I repented. I'm a Christian and my life has changed now." And well, if you don't write history, all that stuff's forgotten. Everything's forgotten. The important stories of people that dedicated so much of their life and sacrificed. There's a story of a man here. His name's, he used to pastor. He used to be the superintendent for the gospel mission, which was right next to where CCC is in the 19-teens. And
currently CCC, the current location.
Yeah, the current location. Okay. And he tells a story how this Sophie, the scrub woman, would come up to him and say, Mr. Klein, you need to go down and visit that church down by the morgue on the other side of the, in the bad part of town. There was this church near the morgue, which was a early Pentecostal church in DC, which was, small, but revivalistic. And she kept reminding him to go down there. And eventually he went down there and he found his wife was down there. And he found a good friend, which was the pastor of this church, Harry Collier. So if you don't write and keep the history, all that's forgotten.
Yeah.
And then, a lot of times new communities face a lot of opposition because they're different. So, this church believes in the gifts of the Spirit. So the prophetic, that believe in speaking in tongues. They believe in other gifts that God does, miracles. And during this time in DC, a lot of the newspapers would always publish stuff that was quite critical of that tradition because they didn't understand it.
It is a little unusual for an outsider. Yeah.
Well, for an outsider, but in terms of world Christianity today,
I know
it's like it's like most of the churches that are doing anything around the world come from those traditions.
Yeah.
So it's not a new thing today.
Yeah. I went to Pentecostal church here one time. Fuller, is it Fuller? Springfield, was it? Right next to here. Is that a street, Fuller?
Near here?
Yeah. Is that Fuller Drive?
I don't know.
Real Pentecostal.
Some of them, so there's different styles.
It was really out there.
Some are a little out there.
Is that the Fireball?
Yeah, Fireball.
yeah. So there's some strange stuff out there.
Dragon Ball, like.
There's always strange stuff.
Look, I'm open to it. I don't want to be closed. I'm just saying it's unusual. I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
But the best critics come from within the tradition.
I believe it.
So the people that know when people are doing something that is like a little off, the people who are actually true Christians, they'll be able to speak the truth, and if there's any craziness, they'll be able to identify it and deal with it.
So reading your book, I kind of thought about our church a little bit. I don't know if you have any thoughts in terms of the application for, us today. But for me, I think, you know what it is? I feel pride. And we should have a little bit of pride when you know your history. So like you like the Redskins, you want to honor their Super Bowl. And I have a little pride, because my family was involved in the church. And I think that's a good thing.
Yes.
So I want to always keep that in the back of my mind.
The Chinese Church of DC can be proud of its history. It has some beautiful things in the history. Now, not everything is perfect, but still, at the same time, it is a church that tried and has striven to be an influential Christian community in the city and reach Chinese. And out of this Chinese church, a lot of churches have popped up all over the place. So I think that it has had a valuable past, and it has had an important community. I've heard some people say, "Oh, it's not really a Chinese church because you have a Latin American person and a white person and a black person attending and a Korean. It's not really Chinese, it's Asian." Well, that's not really a fair comment, because it is a church that is a Chinese church because it fits into that tradition. And in Chinese churches all over the world, you have like mixed groups of people attending.
I think they would say maybe it's a second gen or third generation.
Actually, this is a church that has 3 generations, has 3 groups. We still have immigrants coming in. We have second generation. We have third generation Chinese. So it's a Christian church foremost, but I think its identification can be Chinese. No problem with
that. What I'm thinking about as I read your book and hearing you? I think the temptation, not for you, but for young people who are maybe a little bit too zealous. They think they're too special, but I think it's important to balance out. We're part of something bigger. Like, yeah, sure, we're doing new things, but you're not that special in the sense that there wasn't people before you. And I think I look at the Jewish people in the Old Testament, like they try to remind them, like, this is part of a bigger story. And so there's a sense of sobriety when you think about yourself being a part of a bigger narrative. Is that part of something you're trying to share? Is that a thing that you think about?
I'm trying to put this church in the context of the broader Christian tradition.
Yeah.
So this church is a part of the DC Christian community. It has an authentic place. And so the DC community is full of churches that are proud that the presidents sat in their pew,
right?
That a senator sat in their pew, or that they have this historical connection.
Well, the DC churches, our church is saying we're proud because the architect, right?
Right. So the Chinese church says we're proud because our architect helped design the dome, the Capitol dome.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah, wasn't our church a synagogue before?
It was a synagogue.
The current location?
Yeah,
I forgot.
It was a synagogue.
It was questioned.
And before that, it was a Presbyterian church.
But you know what that combats? A little bit of narcissism, in my opinion. Like, we're so special that no one can relate to us. I think that's kind of what I wasn't saying that, but I think that's what you're trying to say when you were talking about like what I do isn't that special. I'm like, I agree. I think it should be standard protocol. I'm not saying I am special, but I'm saying
well, you're special. I think you're special.
I'm saying this is what I think should be done, and more often.
Yeah.
So yeah, we should have a sense of we're part of something bigger when we look at history. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else from the book? I mean, that's kind of maybe. We need to also not overlook people. I think it's probably one year.
Yeah, one of the things that I really liked writing in the book, I intentionally mentioned the name of academics and people that influenced me in my preface. And I think that's important for all of us. All of us need to get a piece of butcher board. And in our life, we need to write the names down of the people who have positively influenced us and people that we've learned something from. Because most of us, we don't do that. And we go to a board. A butcher board is just a white piece of paper that they used to wrap meat with it, I think.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, it's just white paper, and you'd get a marker and just write the names down and write graphs.
It's like a whiteboard before.
Yeah, whiteboard. and you basically, put the names of the people that have touched your life.
Yeah.
And then sometime tell them that, one of the things I wish I had done, and I didn't even do it in my book, but I had a teacher in high school. Her name was Mrs. Reese. She was a forensic teacher. And I heard long years ago that she asked where I was, because I had disappeared. When I joined the military from Bakersfield, it was goodbye to Bakersfield. And I only have contact with one or two people from high school.
I've went back and I've written to my teachers I thought was influential.
You need to let them know.
I did. And I think I wrote to a nun who's probably in a monastery or a convent, sorry. And I think she's probably pretty lonely, but I bet you she doesn't get a lot of letters from former students, but she probably really appreciated. She's the one that taught me how to read.
Yeah.
So I said, thank you.
You did a beautiful thing.
But I do I think that's a good spiritual discipline. How about that?
Every single person who listens to this long podcast, which I doubt many people will listen to because it's so long, you need to, contact people in your life that have touched your life and just let them know that you're thankful for them. That's so powerful to be able to do that. And so Mrs. Reese was one that I didn't contact. That's a regret. I got regrets.
And she died. Is that what you're saying?
She died. She's dead. Yeah. She's old. She was really old. So
I had my favorite pastor, Dan Ho. He signed my Bible.
Yeah.
He died. I gave him money for his funeral.
Yeah.
I lost that Bible because Ethiopian Airlines lost my suitcase. I just want to throw him under the bus. But I cherish that because he wrote in that Bible to me. You have any thoughts, Edward? I know we've kind of talked. I don't think there's anything new to you because I've said this countless times, right, Edward?
Yes.
Go ahead. You share your thoughts.
Your Bible being lost?
No, not that I hate Ethiopians. Go ahead. Perspective, I think, maybe.
I had one art teacher. I had one in high school that I really appreciated. Her name was Mrs. Barnes. And she was an older lady, maybe like in her 70s. And I was in high school. And I never wrote to her. But I look back on it and I wish I did because she's probably...
you can find her name. Why not?
I tried to Google her and she might be deceased just because of how old she was in high school. But I wasn't a good student in high school. I had like the less than 1.0 GPA, kind of a loser, but I always felt seen by her and she wanted me to be a teacher, her aide for other classes and even like her AP classes. So she made me feel important and she made me,
wow.
She encouraged me to pursue art, even though I didn't know what I wanted to do. But that's the one teacher that I just wish I wrote to.
Yeah. I'm still trying to find someone that I worked with. I just sent out a blind text to what I thought was her daughter and haven't gotten a response. But, it's someone that I taught in China with. But it's hard to reach people in China.
There's not a single person.
Yeah.
I'm proud to say that I feel that I need a message that I have a message.
Good.
But it's to me, what that practice is, a practice gratitude and also vulnerability. So I think that's something I try.
Yeah.
But, Edward, anything else? Don, anything else as we wrap it up? Anything we want?
Nothing else.
Just
thanks that you guys came over and shared some tea and some sweets. And it's been a joy.
Real quick, want to talk about your current teaching gig? Is it a gig or a professorship? I don't know what the word is.
What's going on?
I teach per course at Asset College. I teach church history right now. It's one general course of church history, which is kind of hard to teach church history.
I think it's too fast. It's too much.
It's fast, but it's better than doing nothing.
Yeah.
So I give them a book. They have 2 books to read, and then I'll discuss some things online, and then they'll have discussion to do.
Anything coming down the pipeline for you? More classes, another book, whatever.
I'm going to Hong Kong with my wife, and eat Chinese food.
Okay,
that's about it now.
You going? I feel like you did that recently.
Yeah.
Anything professionally?
Nothing professionally.
Okay, so you're just enjoying being at Ascent, teaching one class.
I'm just enjoying right now.
Okay.
Because I have work I have to do there as the there's a category that I'm responsible for.
Any other books coming down, or you?
No, I'm not thinking of another book.
I will say for myself, we only have so much time. And I spent the time writing the books that I wanted to write about my dad and ministry. And boy, I'm real happy I did that because my brain can only fit so much. And I think it would have started getting lost if I didn't do that. But
it's good you did. It's a good discipline to do that.
I really enjoyed it, is what I'm saying. And not just for myself. Whether other people like it or not, it's whatever. But I thought that was real rewarding and a challenge.
That's good. You should write more. You should simplify. I found, it's actually beneficial to write very simple, that's accessible for people, because you will sell books. Otherwise, you won't sell many.
I don't know if that's even the goal. I don't think.
I think it should be. I think it can be. So once you write for yourself, you need to write for others. So you write for yourself.
Yeah.
To get your stuff out there.
Yeah.
But then you kind of think, how can I help other people?
I did write for other people. It's true, but I think it's a lofty goal. Edward, any thoughts, man? With the books I wrote?
You do both at the same time.
No, I'm saying, is there any loss? Is it lost in translation, my message, or say able to get across anything I wrote?
I think it's a hit or miss depending on who reads it. Cause
you know what? If you like me, you might read it. How about that? If you really like me, you might read it.
Yeah.
Or I force you to read it, you might read it.
Yeah.
All right, we'll end it there. But thank you, Don, Chaplain Don, for sharing. And I'm sure you're going to be doing more.
Yeah, you can call me Don.
Yeah.
I'm not a big one for names and titles. I mean, technically.
Don't say Gork.
Yeah, no, don't. Hopefully, behind my back, you guys aren't used to that. Hey man, hey Gork. No, please.
Gork
I let that word out.
Gork threw me out the bus. You need to reach out to that guy you threw out the bus.
No, he's gone.
He's probably jailbird.
But I did do something recently, because while I was there, so I've always done international, cross-cultural ministry. So while I was in college, for 4 years, I was in a Mexican church, Spanish church. I spoke Spanish.
Do you still speak Spanish?
I still speak Spanish, but it's like disappearing because of my Chinese.
Yeah.
But if it would come back quickly. And so I was in the Spanish the Spanish church, and for 4 years, and I just sent a video of myself wishing the pastor and his wife happy 50th anniversary of ministry. I sent them a little statement.
Okay.
So, to remember people like that is important.
True.
Their daughter, who's a psychologist, married to a counselor, pastoring the church. I used to put her on my toe, and I just lift her up. She, with my leg, she'd stand on my toe, and I just go like this, and then she'd be up in the air. Woo! So she wrote me, and she asked me to write something about the parents.
All right.
So that was a joy.
Okay. All right, sounds good, but we better end it here.
You better end it here. It's too long.
We got some time to grab a bite, but Thank you.
If someone listens to the whole thing, they need to tell me, and then I'll have to buy them something to eat.